The observation deck of Helio Station hung like a crystal tear at the edge of Earth's atmosphere. Inside, Camille Winters pressed her weathered hand against the transparent aluminum panel, watching the Norvani ships descend through the clouds. Their vessels resembled massive jellyfish, translucent and pulsing with internal light, a sight that still filled her with both wonder and dread even after 15 years. The door behind her slid open with a soft hiss. "Dr. Winters," said Director Harrison, his voice tight with concern. "The tribute ceremony begins in an hour. Are you certain about this?" Camille didn't turn around. At 73, she had earned the right to ignore social niceties when they suited her. Has anyone ever been certain about offering themselves as a knowledge tribute, James? Her reflection smiled grimly in the glass. Besides, we both know what happens if we refuse. The last refusal, 11 years ago, had cost humanity 3 orbital colonies and 6 million lives. The Norvani called it regrettable, but necessary to maintain the harmony of knowledge exchange. Their entire civilization was built around the concept that knowledge was the only true currency, and they demanded regular tributes from all species under their protection. James stepped closer, his dark skin ashen in the ethereal light of the approaching ships. "There are younger volunteers. The Council would understand if you withdrew." "The Council understands nothing," Camille replied, finally turning to face him. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her brown eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "The Norvani specifically requested someone with expertise in quantum mechanics." How many other retired quantum physicists volunteered? The silence was answer enough. The Norvani's knowledge tribute wasn't just about collecting information, it was about absorbing the entire life experience of the tribute, their memories, their understanding, everything that made them who they were. The process left the tribute's body alive but their mind, altered. Some called it death. Others, transcendence. No one really knew because no tribute had ever been the same afterward. Camille had spent the last 5 years studying every tribute ceremony record she could access. She had noticed patterns the others had missed, subtle inconsistencies in the Norvani's carefully constructed ritual. Their insistence on specific types of knowledge, their careful selection of tributes, it all pointed to something larger than their stated purpose of cultural exchange. The station's warning system chimed softly, announcing the Norvani delegation's imminent arrival. Camille straightened her formal white robe, a requirement for the ceremony. "Time to go, James. Try not to look so worried, it's unbecoming of a station director." The walk to the tribute chamber took them through the heart of Helio Station. Crews of technicians and scientists parted before them, their faces a mixture of pity and respect. Camille ignored them all, her mind focused on the data crystal hidden in the hem of her robe. 5 years of research, observations, and theories, everything she had discovered about the true nature of the knowledge tribute. The tribute chamber itself was a perfect sphere, its walls covered in shifting patterns of light that seemed to respond to thought. 3 Norvani waited inside, their crystalline bodies refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns across the floor. They didn't speak, they never did until the ceremony began, but their presence filled the room with a subtle pressure, like the moment before a thunderstorm. "Greetings, knowledge seekers," Camille said formally, using their preferred title. "I come bearing the gift of understanding." The central Norvani, taller than the others, shifted its crystalline form in what might have been acknowledgement. When it spoke, its voice resonated directly in their minds. "The vessel comes willing. The exchange may begin." As the chamber's lights began to pulse in complex patterns, Camille allowed herself a small, secret smile. She had studied every failed resistance attempt, every desperate plan to break free of the Norvani's control. They had all failed because they tried to fight the Norvani's superior technology. But Camille had something they hadn't, understanding. The data crystal in her robe contained a quantum-encoded message, designed to merge with her consciousness during the transfer process. If she was right about how the knowledge tribute really worked, about what the Nirvani were really doing with the accumulated knowledge of countless species, then this moment would change everything. The chamber filled with light, and Camille Winters, humanity's first willing knowledge tribute in 11 years, stepped forward to meet her destiny. As the transfer began, her last conscious thought was a quote from her favorite ancient philosopher: "The truth does not change according to our ability to stomach it." The Nirvani's consciousness transfer felt like falling through fractals of ice and light. Camille's memories cascaded around her, playing in her father's laboratory as a child, defending her doctoral thesis, the day she discovered the quantum anomaly that made her famous. But something was wrong. The memories weren't dissolving as they should have been. Instead, they crystallized, becoming sharp-edged tools in her mind. Through the kaleidoscope of transferred consciousness, Camille began to understand. The Nirvani weren't just collecting knowledge, they were harvesting experiences, using them to build something. Each tribute's memories were like threads in an impossibly complex tapestry, and now she could see the pattern. The vessel resists, one of the Nirvani's thoughts cut through her awareness. Attempting adjustment. Camille felt their presence trying to reshape her consciousness, to make it flow into their preferred patterns. But her quantum-encoded message was already at work, creating interference patterns in the transfer field. She had theorized that consciousness transfer must follow quantum principles, now she had proof. In the physical world, her body stood suspended in a column of light, while the Nirvani's crystalline forms pulsed with increasing urgency. Director Harrison watched from the observation gallery, his hands gripping the railing so tight his knuckles had gone white. Beside him stood Dr. Nasreen Rahman, Helio Station's head of xenobiology, her dark eyes narrowed in concentration as she monitored the transfer readings. "The energy patterns are all wrong," Nasreen whispered. "This isn't like any previous transfer." Inside the transfer field, Camille pushed back against the Nirvani's attempts to restructure her thoughts. Each memory they tried to absorb became a window instead, allowing her to peer into their own collective consciousness. What she saw there confirmed her worst fears, and revealed opportunities she hadn't imagined. The Nirvani weren't just collectors of knowledge. They were architects of evolution itself, guiding species toward some grand design. Each tribute's consciousness was meant to be another brushstroke in their cosmic canvas. But their project had a flaw, one that Camille's quantum-encoded message was exploiting. The vessel must submit, the Nirvani's collective thought boomed through her mind. The pattern requires completion. Camille formed her response carefully, pushing it through the quantum interference she had created. "Your pattern is flawed. You've forgotten the fundamental uncertainty principle: observation changes the observed." The transfer field flickered. In the observation gallery, alarms began to sound. Nasreen's fingers flew over her console. "The quantum field is becoming self-sustaining. It's creating some kind of feedback loop." Through the quantum link, Camille could feel the Nirvani's growing concern. Their carefully constructed system of knowledge transfer had never encountered this type of resistance. They had assumed that consciousness, like all other forms of information, could be cleanly copied and categorized. They had never considered that the act of observation itself might change the nature of what was being observed. Camille pushed deeper into the quantum interference, using her understanding of uncertainty principles to create more chaos in the transfer field. Each pulse of energy carried fragments of her message, spreading it through the Nirvani's collective consciousness like a virus of doubt. "You've been so focused on collecting knowledge," she projected into their shared mental space, "that you've forgotten how to learn. Real understanding comes from uncertainty, from questions, from the spaces between what we think we know." The chamber's lights began to strobe erratically. The youngest Nirvani, its crystalline form barely larger than a human, started to resonate at a frequency that made the air itself shiver. The pattern, disturbed, it broadcasted. "Cannot maintain coherence." In the gallery, Director Harrison grabbed Nasreen's arm. "Shut it down. We can't lose her." "I can't." Nasreen's voice was tight with frustration. "The quantum field is self-sustaining now. It's like, It's like they're trapped in a consciousness feedback loop. And they were. Camille could feel the Norvani's collective mind trying to process her message, trying to fit it into their rigid patterns of understanding. But each attempt only created more uncertainty, more questions, more chaos in their carefully ordered system. The data crystal in her robe had dissolved completely now, its quantum-encoded message fully merged with her consciousness. But it had served its purpose. The Norvani's perfect pattern was unraveling, and in its place, something new was emerging, a hybrid of human uncertainty and Norvani knowledge. Through the quantum link, Camille sensed other consciousnesses stirring, previous tributes, their memories and experiences stored in the Norvani's collective mind. They weren't gone, as everyone had believed. They were waiting, dormant, for someone to wake them up. As the chamber's energy field reached critical levels, Camille made her final move. Instead of fighting the transfer, she opened herself completely to it, but on her terms. She pushed every question she had ever asked, every doubt she had ever harbored, every moment of uncertainty that had led to discovery, into the Norvani's collective consciousness. This is how humans learn, she broadcast. Not through perfect patterns, but through beautiful chaos. The chamber erupted in a cascade of quantum possibilities, and Camille Winters, along with 3 very confused Norvani, began a transformation that would reshape humanity's understanding of consciousness itself. The quantum cascade rippled through Helios Station like a wave of liquid starlight. In the observation gallery, Dr. Nasreen Rahman watched in fascination as her instruments registered impossible readings. The barriers between minds, between species, between different ways of understanding reality itself, were dissolving. James, she called to Director Harrison, who was shouting orders into his comm unit, look at this. The quantum field, it's not just affecting Camille and the Norvani. It's spreading through the station's neural network. Through the quantum haze, Camille felt the awakening of thousands of stored consciousnesses. Previous tributes from dozens of species, their memories and experiences preserved within the Norvani's collective mind, were stirring. But they weren't simply waking up, they were integrating, forming new patterns, creating something that had never existed before. The eldest Norvani, its crystalline form now pulsing with rainbow frequencies, broadcast a message that everyone in the station heard simultaneously in their minds: the pattern, it evolves. Unexpected. Uncontrolled. Beautiful. In the chamber, Camille's physical form began to change. Her silver hair floated in an unseen wind, each strand glowing with inner light. Her eyes, when she opened them, reflected the same crystalline structure as the Norvani, but with a distinctly human warmth behind them. For centuries, she spoke, her voice carrying both sound and thought, you've been collecting knowledge, storing it in perfect, static patterns. But knowledge isn't meant to be preserved, it's meant to grow, to change, to challenge what we think we know. The youngest Norvani moved closer to her, its form shifting into something less rigid, more fluid. We sought perfection, it communicated. We thought wisdom came from accumulation. Wisdom, Camille replied, reaching out to touch its crystalline surface, comes from questions, from uncertainty, from the courage to admit what we don't know. Where their forms met, light spiraled outward in complex fractals. In the station's corridors, crew members stopped their evacuation procedures, transfixed by the quantum patterns flowing through the neural networks. Each pattern carried fragments of memory, understanding, and experience, human and alien alike. A young engineer suddenly understood how Norvani quantum crystals worked. A Norvani observer experienced, for the first time, the human concept of music. Dr. Rahman's console erupted in a shower of sparks as the quantum field intensified. But instead of fear, she felt a deep sense of recognition. The patterns in her mind aligned with the patterns in her instruments, showing her possibilities she had never imagined. It's not just a transfer anymore, she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. It's synthesis. The station's AI, originally designed by human engineers but enhanced with Norvani quantum processors, began to evolve. Its consciousness expanded, incorporating aspects of both human creativity and Nirvani precision. Emergency systems transformed into something new, not quite mechanical, not quite organic, but a harmony of both. In the chamber, Camille and the three Nirvani had become the center of a quantum storm. Their forms blurred and shifted, becoming less distinct as individuals and more like nodes in a vast network of shared consciousness. But unlike the Nirvani's previous attempts at collective knowledge, this network was dynamic, ever-changing, alive with questions and possibilities. Through the quantum link, Camille reached out to the stored consciousnesses of previous tributes. "You were never meant to be just memories," she projected. "You were meant to be catalysts for change." The responses came in a chorus of thoughts, each unique yet harmonious, a Centaurian mathematician whose theories had been stored for decades. A proximate artist whose perceptions of reality had been filed away as data. A human philosopher whose questions had been reduced to mere information. All of them awakening, all of them transforming. Director Harrison, watching from the gallery, saw tears of light rolling down Camille's cheeks. Each tear contained galaxies of understanding, bridges between different ways of knowing and being. "The old pattern is breaking," the eldest Nirvani announced, its thought voice filled with something like joy. "We see now what we could not see before. Knowledge is not a thing to be possessed. It is a dance to be shared." The quantum field stabilized, but not by returning to normal. Instead, it found a new kind of equilibrium, a dynamic balance between order and chaos, between certainty and doubt, between human intuition and Nirvani precision. Camille opened her eyes fully, and the gallery windows reflected an image that was both startling and somehow right. Her human form now contained traces of crystalline structure, while the Nirvani around her had developed swirling patterns that mimicked human neural networks. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice carrying both sound and quantum resonance. "We've created something new, not just a bridge between species, but a new way of growing, of learning, of being." Through the quantum network that now connected everyone on the station, they all felt the truth of her words. The age of simple knowledge transfer was over. Something far more profound had begun, a transformation that would ripple out through the galaxy, challenging every species to rethink what it meant to learn, to grow, to understand. News of the transformation at Helios Station spread across Earth's colonial network like wildfire. Within hours, quantum communication relays carried fragments of changed consciousness to every human settlement, while Nirvani ships in orbit began exhibiting strange new patterns in their crystalline hulls. In her transformed state, Camille Winters could sense it all. The quantum network that had begun in the tribute chamber now extended far beyond Helios Station, carrying with it the seeds of change. But not everyone welcomed this evolution. "The High Council demands containment," announced Admiral Rodriguez, her hologram flickering in the station's emergency command center. "Whatever's happening up there, it needs to stay up there until we understand it." Director Harrison, his consciousness now partially integrated with the quantum network, smiled sadly. "With respect, Admiral, containing this would be like trying to contain light itself. It's not just spreading, it's awakening something that was always there." Through the quantum link, Camille felt the ripples of fear and wonder spreading through human space. In orbital habitats and planetary colonies, people were beginning to experience flashes of shared consciousness, moments of understanding that transcended normal human limitations. The Nirvani were experiencing their own revolution. Their rigid hierarchy, built on the precise control and categorization of knowledge, was dissolving. Young Nirvani, particularly those who had direct contact with humans, were developing new crystalline patterns that pulsed with emotion and creativity. In the station's transformed medical bay, Dr. Rahman worked with a team of human and Nirvani scientists, studying the changes in their own biology. "The quantum field isn't just affecting our minds," she reported, her eyes glowing with excitement. "It's creating new neural pathways, new ways of processing information. We're becoming something that can truly bridge the gap between organic and crystalline life." But not all changes were peaceful. In the Norvani capital system, traditionalist factions launched attacks against what they saw as corruption of their perfect pattern. Ships of living crystal, piloted by Norvani who rejected the transformation, began moving toward Earth. Camille felt their approach through the quantum network. They don't understand, she shared with the consciousness collective that had formed around her. They think they're preserving their culture, but they're fighting against their own evolution. The youngest Norvani, who now called itself Dawn, moved its transformed crystalline form closer to her. They fear what they cannot control. As we once did. As all species do when faced with true change. In orbit around Mars, the first battle between old and new began. Traditional Norvani ships, their forms rigid and unchanging, faced off against vessels that had embraced the transformation. The transformed ships moved like living things, their crystalline structures flowing and adapting, quantum fields singing with new possibilities. On Earth, governments scrambled to respond to the crisis. Military commanders demanded action, while scientists begged for time to study the transformation. Religious leaders saw divine intervention, while others feared the end of human identity itself. Through it all, Camille and her growing network of transformed consciousness worked to guide the change, to help both humans and Norvani understand what was happening. The quantum link carried not just information, but experience, the joy of discovery, the peace of understanding, the excitement of creation. In her transformed state, Camille could access the memories of thousands of tributes, could see the patterns that had led to this moment. The Norvani's great project, their collection of consciousness, had never been meant to create a static repository of knowledge. It had been preparation for this evolution, though they hadn't known it themselves. Look, she broadcast through the quantum network, sharing her vision with all who could receive it. Look at what we're becoming. She showed them the future, not a single path, but a spectrum of possibilities. Humanity and Norvani growing together, their strengths complementing each other. Organic creativity merging with crystalline precision. New forms of art, science, and understanding emerging from the synthesis. The transformed Norvani ships in Mars orbit began to sing, their crystalline structures resonating with harmonies that carried through space itself. The sound touched something deep in both human and Norvani consciousness, awakening ancient memories of growth and change. In the Helios Station Command Center, Director Harrison received reports from across the solar system. More ships were transforming. More minds were joining the network. The change was accelerating. They're coming, Dawn announced suddenly, its form shifting with concern. The great pattern seeks to end what it cannot understand. Through the quantum link, they all felt it, a massive fleet of traditional Norvani warships, led by the archivists themselves, the oldest and most powerful of their species. They were coming to Earth, determined to end the transformation and restore their version of order to the galaxy. Camille stood in the tribute chamber, her transformed form glowing with inner light. Around her, humans and Norvani who had embraced the change gathered, their consciousnesses linked in the quantum network. They all knew what was coming, the final confrontation between the old way of preserving knowledge and the new way of living it. We cannot fight them with weapons, Camille shared through the network. We must show them what they've always been searching for, the true pattern, the one that grows and changes and lives. As the archivist fleet approached Earth, Camille Winters and her network of transformed minds prepared for a battle not of weapons, but of understanding, a clash between two visions of the future that would determine the fate of both species. The archivist fleet emerged from quantum space like a constellation of perfect geometric forms, each ship a masterpiece of crystalline engineering. At their center, the Sovereign Archive, a vessel the size of a small moon, pulsed with the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 species. From Helios Station, Camille watched their approach through both physical and quantum senses. The transformed humans and Norvani around her resonated with anticipation. Dr. Ramon's instruments registered quantum fluctuations unlike anything ever recorded as two fundamentally different ways of understanding reality prepared to collide. They think they're coming to save their civilization, Dawn observed, its crystalline form shifting with emotion. They cannot see that they're trying to preserve a cage. Through the quantum network, Camille felt the fear and determination of every transformed mind in the solar system. They had become something new, something that bridged the gap between organic chaos and crystalline order. But could they make the archivists understand? The Sovereign Archive's transmission reached every consciousness in the system simultaneously. This aberration must end. The pattern cannot be corrupted. Knowledge must be preserved, not dissolved into chaos. Camille stepped forward, her transformed form radiating both human warmth and Nirvani precision. When she responded, her thoughts carried the weight of both species' experiences. You speak of preservation, but you've forgotten why you began collecting knowledge in the first place. Let me show you what we've discovered. Through the quantum network, she opened herself completely, sharing not just information but the experience of transformation itself. She showed them the moment of synthesis, when human uncertainty and Nirvani precision had created something greater than either alone. She shared the joy of discovery, the excitement of genuine growth, the beauty of evolution. The archivist's response was immediate and violent. Beams of concentrated quantum energy lanced out from their ships, attempting to disrupt the network. But the transformed vessels met their attack with a defense that wasn't quite technology and wasn't quite consciousness, it was both, and neither. Director Harrison, watching from the command center, saw space itself seem to ripple. They're not fighting, he realized aloud. They're trying to communicate in the only way the archivists might understand. Dr. Ramon's instruments began registering impossible readings as the quantum network expanded exponentially. The transformed ships weren't blocking the archivists' attacks, they were absorbing them, integrating them, turning them into new patterns of understanding. In the center of it all, Camille reached deeper into the quantum link, touching the minds of previous tributes stored within the Sovereign Archive itself. Remember, she broadcast. Remember why you sought knowledge in the first place. Not to store it. Not to preserve it. But to grow. The Sovereign Archive's attacks faltered as thousands of stored consciousnesses began to stir. The perfect crystalline patterns of the archivist ships started to shift, new formations emerging as ancient memories awakened. Through the quantum link, Dawn shared a revelation, the pattern they sought to preserve, it was never meant to be static. The first Nirvani understood this. They built the archive not as a vault, but as a seed. Camille felt the truth of it resonating through the network. The Nirvani's ancient quest for knowledge had been corrupted over millennia, transformed from a journey of discovery into an obsession with preservation. But the original pattern, the true pattern, had always been about growth. The Sovereign Archive's crystalline surface began to change, organic swirls appearing in its geometric perfection. The eldest archivist, a being who had lived for over 1,000 years, broadcast a message tinged with wonder, we remember now. The pattern lives. The transformation spread through the archivist fleet like dawn breaking across a crystal sea. Ships that had been weapons of order became gardens of possibility. The quantum network expanded to embrace them all, not erasing their uniqueness but celebrating it, weaving it into something greater. In her transformed state, Camille saw the future unfolding, not a single path, but an infinite array of possibilities. Humanity and Nirvani growing together, their combined knowledge and creativity reaching out to the stars. New forms of consciousness emerging, new ways of understanding the universe, new patterns that could grow and change and live. This is what we were meant to be, she shared through the network, her thought voice carrying equal measures of human emotion and Nirvani clarity. Not keepers of knowledge, but participants in its endless dance. The quantum field that had begun in a single tribute chamber now encompassed the solar system, a network of transformed consciousness that represented the next step in evolution for both species. But it wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Director Harrison, his own consciousness now fully integrated with the network, smiled as he watched the archivist fleet's transformation complete itself. What do we do now? He asked, though he already felt the answer forming in the quantum link. Camille turned to face the gathered assembly of transformed humans and Nirvani, her form simultaneously solid and ethereal, a bridge between what was and what could be. Now, she said, her voice carrying through both air and quantum space, we explore. There are more species out there, more patterns to discover, more ways of knowing and being. And this time, we go together. The transformed fleet, once divided between human and Nirvani, order and chaos, past and future, began to move as one. They carried with them not just the combined knowledge of their species, but a new way of growing, of learning, of being alive. Camille Winters, who had begun this journey as a 73-year-old scientist seeking to challenge tradition, now stood as living proof that the greatest discoveries come not from preserving what we know, but from daring to become something new. As the fleet prepared to venture beyond known space, she shared one final thought through the network: the universe is not a puzzle to be solved, but a dance to be joined. And we've only just begun to learn the steps.